All right. I think I see our numbers have stopped jumping a little bit, so I'm going to kick things off. Thank you for joining us for tonight's webinar. Our title for the night, Bluejay Family Live, Guiding Students Through the Housing Selection. Tonight, we have a great list of panelists who are going to go through the process of registering for housing at Creighton University. But before we do that, we are going to go over a couple of smaller initiatives that are taking place within the Office of Student and Family Support, as well as a big campus-wide initiative. So first, that big campus-wide initiative is Strive to Thrive. Right now, we're promoting our Strive to Thrive campaign as a way to engage parents and families and students. Our goal is to connect with all of you to share the message that we want our Creighton students to thrive while they're here in their first year. So if you're a student, if you're a parent, if you're a family member, please email us at thrive@creighton.edu if you have questions, if you have a problem to be solved, if you're seeking guidance for what your next steps are as a student or parent or family member. Our goal is to open up our communication doors. And so again, Strive to Thrive at Creighton. This will be going on throughout the months of February, March, and the beginning of April. And so we hope to hear from you. We hope to continue to meet our first year students. And again, our goal is to do whatever we can to help them thrive in their first year at Creighton. The next slide that I want to focus on is some services that we offer in the Office of Student and Family Support. Our office helps manage a lot of our front-facing channels for parents and families, which is probably how you got notified to be on tonight's panel. So just as a quick reminder, Office of Student and Family Support offers our Bluejay Family newsletter that goes out every month. We also manage our Bluejay Family Live panels, which you're on right now. And again, we have a series of those throughout the year. We manage our Bluejay Family Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, as well as run our family@creighton.edu email. And finally, we also manage the Bluejay Family Portal, which if you're not a part of the Bluejay Family Portal just yet, please email family@creighton.edu and we'll make sure we get you signed up. It's our interactive tool where parents and families can sign in and learn information about events, deadlines, paperwork, all that good stuff. You can also reach out to us by calling our success desk, and our number is 402-280-1212. Again, you can email us at family@creighton.edu or success@creighton.edu. So before I kick things over to our first panelist, I just kind of want to go over a couple details of the night. This panel will go for 1 hour, so we should end right at about 9 o'clock Central Time. This is also being recorded, so if you have to step away or if you have to leave early, you will be able to watch the recording. Typically, we have it up within about a week or so. Before we jump in, I do want to practice one of the tools that we're going to be using tonight. We are going to ask that throughout the presentations that folks sitting at home submit their questions using the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. So I want to test this out real quick. Folks at home, go ahead and take your cursor and drag it down to the bottom of the screen where you see Q and A. Then what I'd like you to do is type in where you're sitting tonight or where you're from. Let's test it out and see where everyone's sitting tonight. Oh, tremendous. Okay, so we see Minnesota, Sioux Falls, Kansas City, Milan, St. Louis, Seattle, Iowa, Minnesota. Oh my goodness, so many. California, Colorado. Oh my goodness, this is a lot. I know that our behind the scenes people are going to be clearing these pretty quickly. Wonderful. So that's how to use the Q&A function throughout the night. If you have a question, by all means, type it in there and our team will either answer it or we might ask it live to our group of panelists up front. I'm so excited. We have so many folks on tonight. Thank you for being here. So with that, I'm going to introduce quickly just who our panelists are for the night. Our first one will be Adam Stafford, who is our Director of Housing. Then we will have Taylor Lauge, who is our Assistant Director of Res Life. Next, we'll hear from Danny Steiner, our Assistant Director of Dining Services. And then rounding things off for the night will be Ann Hyman, who is our Director of Student Accessibility Services. So without further ado, let's kick it over to Adam Stafford to start things off.
Great. Thank you, Anne. It's nice to be with you all this evening. I don't know what kind of crazy weather you have where you are. We've gone from 78 degrees yesterday to snowing outside my window here on campus. I'm looking through, I'm originally from New Mexico, and I'm always looking to see how many folks are from New Mexico in these chats, and it's almost always zero. So if anybody's from New Mexico, please make sure you weigh in there. My name's Adam. I've been the Director of Housing here at Creighton for just over a year now. My family and I relocated here to work in my alma mater from Los Angeles, California last year. So I'm a double alum. I got my bachelor's degree in 2003 and my master's degree in 2008, and really happy to be back here at this great institution. I am responsible for a lot of the business administration processes and facilities for housing on campus and some of our student life facilities. Some institutions have housing and residence life combined, but here we have two different teams who are working to support you and your Bluejays while they live on campus as residential students. So I'm here to talk about our sophomore recontracting process. Students there's a live-on requirement for students in their first and second year at Creighton. But even though we require them to live on campus in their sophomore years, they do need to fill out an application and follow the process to give them the maximum opportunity to participate in the lottery and shop for their room for next year. They'll all get a room unless they're granted an exemption. But we need them to go through that process. And I know even as a parent of a 3 and a 5-year-old, I ask them if they've done something and they tell me yes, and they have done nothing of the sort. For you all, you may ask your students, have you done your application? Have you got your roommate group? Do you know where you're going to live next year? And I want to arm you with some specific information and questions so you can make sure that they're giving you accurate information and they're confident that they've worked through this process correctly. So just an overview of our timeline. This process takes the better part of the month. We're getting ready to launch our application this Friday. Students will go to their housing portal to find their application online. Both the application and the roommate group portal are both through the online housing portal. There's two easy ways for the students to get to that portal. The first is in the email we've sent out with the sophomore year housing process. There is a link embedded in that email. They can also get to it through Nest, nearly every student transaction. There's a link to our portal through that avenue as well. So they'll go through, they'll do their application and ask them some basic preferences, roommate profiles, things like that. And we sort of get them set up. And once they've completed the application, they'll be able to access the roommate group formation page where they can shop for roommates, form their roommate groups, verify their roommate groups, and get prepared to go into the selection phase. Everybody needs to be in a roommate group. It can be a group of 2, 3, or 4, but everybody needs to be in a verified group. We'll talk a little bit more about that. They have until Monday, March 18th to complete their housing application and to form their verified roommate groups. After we've closed that process out, at some point during the week of March 18th, we'll send them a selection time email, and we'll open the roommate groups back up in case they've decided to change their minds. They want to do a different group. We need to lock that down for a little bit of time so that we can send everybody out a date and time for the lottery. Every student gets their own individual time. Groups are able to use their best time to go in and pick their rooms, but everybody sort of gets one. So if they decide, these relationships can be volatile at this point in their lives, and suddenly that group of 4 may not be the group of 4 that they want to live with, or they may decide, we'd be better off as 2 groups of 2. They will have the opportunity to shift that if they start to get cold feet about the roommate group that they've formed. But generally, we would hope that they feel pretty confident going into that process that they've got their roommate group for the next year. So we've got that week to process everybody, to make sure everybody's squared away, get them their lottery times. And then the following week, Monday through Thursday, we'll run the sophomore housing lottery. I'm going to jump in and answer a question that I just saw in chat. It is not earliest date. The lottery times are randomized. There are a lot of reasons why folks may not be able to complete their application or get their group together. So everybody who completes their application by the time the application closes, that all gets randomized. There are no factors we consider to give a student a better chance at being at the top of the lottery. It's as equitable as we think we can get. So I will say, normally we would run that lottery Tuesday through Friday and give us Monday coming back from the weekend to get prepared. But with Friday being a holiday, with Easter, we're going to try and launch it on Monday. Say a prayer for us and cross your fingers. We do this every year. We think we'll be fine, but jumping in on Monday, hopefully we won't have any hiccups. But that is a little bit different for us. So like I said, once they've completed their application, they'll be able to go into the roommate portal. There are a couple of ways that they can find a roommate. Taylor Logue with Residence Life is going to talk a little bit about some programming opportunities. So if students feel like they don't know who their roommates, they don't have a prospective roommate, they're not getting maybe along with the one they have right now, or they'd like to change it up a little bit, there will be some opportunities for them to find other students who are looking for roommates. But within the portal itself, you can either, if you already know who you want to live with, you can just search for them directly, either by their screen name, home state, those kinds of things. Or you can search by profile. Profile for us is, do you have, do you prefer a very neat and tidy room, or do you prefer a messy room? Are you an early riser? Are you a late night owl? You can kind of find somebody who has some of those same tendencies or preferences. Or our software will make some suggestions. If you just want to go with the algorithm, so to speak, the wizard will make some suggestions. It will say, okay, based on the answers you gave here, we think you have a pretty strong chance of being a good roommate with these people. Would you like to reach out to them? You can click there. You see at the bottom, click to see suggested roommates. That will take them to that. I think that part of that, if they're going to use that option, it's really important that they answer those questions honestly. Sometimes we experience students, for some reason, they say they think they need to say they're really clean. Turns out maybe they're not so clean. Often we see this sometimes with, obviously tobacco is not allowed on campus, no smoking on campus, but there are some students who smoke off campus. Sometimes that, a jacket can smell a little bit like smoke. You say, well, I don't smoke because I don't want people to discriminate against me because I'm a smoker. But then in reality, the room smells a little bit like cigarette smoke, and you've matched with somebody who might be allergic to cigarette smoke. So it really is important that they go into that and be as honest as possible. Roommate group sizes. Groups must consist of 2, 3, or 4 students, and they must be verified to receive a selection time. Students who don't find a roommate group ultimately will be assigned a room at the end. Everyone is going to be put into a space. But in order to participate in the lottery, we need them to be in one of these roommate groups because these are the size of our housing opportunities. So we think our best, we want to encourage and incentivize folks to make their groups because we think that's going to give everybody the best chance of success next year. So we want them to form those groups, 2, 3, or 4. Verified just means that when they go through and start forming the roommate groups, one of them will be identified as a leader. They'll identify themselves as the group leader. Once that group is put together in the portal, the group leader goes in and verifies, usually with a code that they've gotten through email to say, yes, we're going to lock this in. Everybody agrees. We're good to go. This is the group we want. Sometimes students miss that verification step, so it's a great question to ask them. Do you have your roommate group? What size are you going with next year? Are you going to do 2, 3, 4? And have you verified that group? If they go back in and start shopping around again, it might break their verification. And then they want to know why they didn't get a lottery time, and we have to tell them, well, you didn't have a verified group. You went and started shopping again for a new roommate, and then it broke that up. So you can see the buildings we have available for sophomores: Kennefic, Hyder, McGloin, and Davis. Kennefic is normal, and this year has 2 people apartments, both efficiencies or studios, and 1 bedroom apartments. Next year, a few of those one-bedroom apartments will be tripled. We get a lot of feedback. The group size of 3 is very common for our students, and we often don't have enough 3-bedroom apartments for students. So between the large class size of this class and the incoming freshmen, and the size of the Kennefic apartments, and knowing that those threesomes are groups that we often can't accommodate, we're going to triple a few of those rooms next year. We did that last year in Kennefic too, to great success. Hyder has 2-people apartments and 4-people apartments. McGloin, 4-people apartments. Davis is has an apartment with single bedrooms, private bedrooms, but a shared common space, kitchen, bathroom. And that comes in all kinds of different sizes: 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom. But you see that asterisk, the 2-bedroom and the 3-bedroom, those are there are less opportunities for that. Most of our spaces accommodate 4 students. So a group of 4 is really what we're hoping for. That gives that's the most size that we have. But there may be times where a group of 4 has to split into 2 groups of 2 or break up based on what's available at their time in the lottery. So Monday, March 18th, that's the deadline to confirm those initial roommate group plans. We need to have that information locked down so that we can generate those lottery times. But once we've done that, we'll open it up again. Students can change as needed. Like I said, every student gets a time slot. So even if those groups, you change groups, your time slot remains the same. If your student has one of those like top 10, top 20 time slots, they may become a hot commodity. Everybody wants to be their friend. If they change their roommate group, they just need to be sure to re-verify before we get into the selection, or when they log into the system to select their rooms, they won't see any options. Back when I was a rising sophomore at Creighton, we all met in Brandeis cafeteria and literally wrote our names on large pieces of paper with floor plans on them. Now they log into the portal and they'll be able to see exactly which rooms are available. They can pick if they want that corner room in Davis, or they want an upper floor in over in Kennefic, then they'll be able to see what's available for that. So we expect around Thursday they'll be able to select their rooms again. But by the end of the process, every student who's a rising sophomore will have a room, even if we have to go in and assign them. Like I said, it is a requirement to live on campus. If students are wanting to live at home or have an extenuating circumstance that they think would necessitate an exemption to that requirement, there is an online form. They can email living@creighton.edu and we can connect you with that process, but it's reviewed by our assistant vice provost and our housing team to approve exemptions on a case-by-case basis for extenuating circumstances, unless they're deciding to live at home in the Omaha metro area with a parent. That's our overview, and I will stick around to answer any questions that we have after our panelists.
Great. Thank you, Adam. I always learn so much when I look over the slides, so thank you. And I know that we had some great questions coming through in the chat, and it looks like the one that's open is getting answered right now. Keep those questions coming. We have a whole staff behind the scenes answering those questions. For now, we are going to turn things over to Taylor Lausch, our Assistant Director of Residential Life.
Hello, good evening. I almost said afternoon, goodness. So yes, my name is Taylor. I'm the Assistant Director of Residential Life. I was a resident director for a year and actually just moved into this role. I'm currently studying, thank you so much for the claps, Anne. Currently studying organizational leadership here at Creighton, and I'm really enjoying it. And I primarily oversee the sophomore halls, so the halls that your students are moving into, which are Davis, Hyder, Kennefic, and McGloin. Alrighty. So we're going to talk a little bit about our residential student competencies. The reason why we're talking about this is because we ask our resident advisors and our assistant resident directors to focus programs on these competencies. And we hope that in your sophomore living experience, you'll have the opportunity to, your student will have the opportunity to experience this. So the first competency is service, faith, and justice, which is the ability of students to develop, defend, and act on one's personal beliefs. Second is identity establishment and exploration. So of course we want your students to learn who they are and learn about other people. Life skills development, which Adam just talked about, kind of how how halls look in the sophomore residential, for your specific rooms. And definitely with the sophomore halls, students will learn independent living because of the way that their rooms are shaped. Then diversity and inclusivity. So they will be able to develop relationships with a diverse group of people, especially during programming. Relationship development. So we're here as residential life and as support to help your students build good and healthy relationships. And then finally, transitions. So clearly your students are currently learning how to live without you guys and live on their own. And then as sophomores, they'll learn more about living on their own, but also how to live with other people. So we program around these competencies, but also just in living in the halls, we hope that your students are able to, I lost my train of thought. Your students are able to experience these competencies. Perfect. Okay, so as Adam said, we have a few programs that are going to be happening specifically so your students can both get to know other students if they're kind of worried about finding roommates. So Monday, March 11th, we will have a roommate mixer. We're going to have some nice little snacks and some questions that your student and their prospective roommates can ask each other, and it'll just be a fun time for them to get to know each other. And this is a great resource also for them to find a roommate group. So that will be in Harper, 2058. And then our second program is so they can see the living spaces before they sign on to the lottery. So each sophomore hall will have an open house on Wednesday, March 13th from 5 to 7 p.m. So that would be Davis, McGloin, Kennefic, and Hyder. And there will be specific rooms open for each of the halls that your students can tour. So it's always a fun time. So again, my apologies, that was my cat. We are very, very interested in programming, and we want to engage your students with events and just ways for them to connect with other people. So just in the month of February, we did 18 RA programs and 29 programs for 2024. And in total, we've had around 435 attendees in our February programs. So we are looking forward to engaging your students more in their sophomore year, of course. But yeah, so that's just a little bit of information about our programming efforts. And finally, there are always going to be differences and similarities in living between your first year and your sophomore year. Um, you, as I said before, the rooms in the sophomore halls look a little bit differently than the rooms in the first year halls. They'll have more roommates, most likely. And so they're going to learn independence in a different way than they have their first year. And then also how to coexist with other people as well as shared responsibilities. My apologies. There's a kitchen in some of the sophomore residence halls, so that would include a fridge and an oven. So they're going to have to learn how to do dishes. They're going to have to learn who's paying for groceries one week and who's paying for groceries the next week, which is something they might have been doing for their first year, but it's going to still look just a tad bit different with the amount of roommates that they have. Hall staff is the same. They will have a similar amount of resident advisors as they would their first year. Um, and then, of course, they'll have a resident director that lives in the hall as well, who is a professional staff member as support. And finally, student accountability will look the same as their first year. So, yeah, it was wonderful talking with you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Taylor. I love to see all the numbers of just how much programming is happening in the residence halls. And I know we have time for Q&A, but Taylor, do our residents get notified of those through like a group chat, through a bulletin board, or is it like all of the above?
It's really all of the above. It's up to the person who's putting on the program. Often we'll send emails through their Creighton email, and flyers, posters, all of that fun stuff is also like pretty popular. I know one resident advisor gave each of their students handwritten notes and was like, please come to my program. So they'll engage you in whatever way they see fit.
I just love that because I know right now in Omaha, like it's super windy tonight, but the weather sometimes February and March, it can feel cold. And so I always say the more programming that we can encourage our students to go to in the residence halls, make those connections and just like have some fun at night. I think that's wonderful. So great to hear. Okay, we are going to switch gears, reminding folks at home to submit your questions to the Q&A. And while you are all doing that, we will turn things over to Danny Steiner.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Danny Steiner. I work with the dining program here at Creighton. Like Adam, I'm a graduate of the university, and I've worked at Creighton in a variety of roles since 2010. Most recently, the last 3 years with the dining program. So some of you are probably wondering why the dining person is here to come talk about room selection. So let me explain that. The first thing I would probably say is that when it comes to housing, it's often said that it's all about location, location, location. And I'm here to remind folks that like physically where your building is may matter. And it's not just about proximity to classes. One of the things that we talk to students about is, does it make a difference where you live if you're closer to Harper versus Brandeis for a dining hall? Or would living in McGloin be great for you because you'd have that awesome market where you can get groceries or late night pizza just right downstairs, right? Where's the nearest Starbucks to all these housing options? So we really want students to be thinking about, we got dining options all throughout campus. We have housing east to west, and so you can think about like the dining program when you're thinking about that. And of course, like as Adam mentioned, there's a 2-year live-on requirement. Part of that requirement that he has includes a dining requirement. So there's going to be a meal plan component with most students, unless there's an exemption, and we can talk a little bit more about that later. But for the most part, there's going to be a dining option for those students living in the house. So I think it's useful to talk about what those meal plans are. Of course, next year, we're going to have the same options that you've enjoyed as first-year students, but we're going to add one more. And so that's the all access, the 14 per week and the 10 per week. And we're going to add one more in there. That's the apartment 7. Now that meal plan is for those folks that ultimately choose to live in Davis or Kennefic or Hyder, because those housing options have in-suite kitchens, whereas McGloin has multiple kitchens throughout the building, but they're for the floors or wings of that hall. And so for those places with in-room kitchens, we offer that Apartment 7, which is a bit of a reduced plan, and it offers it presumes that you'll be doing a little more cooking in your room and utilizing that kitchen, because that's probably why you chose, at least a factor in why you chose that room style. And like always, we'll have a meal plan change period to start each semester, so students can make sure that they're in the right meal plan for their new living situation and their new schedule each semester. What's going to happen is there's nothing for the students to do through room selection about their meal plan right now. We will auto-enroll students in a meal plan in the summer, and we'll communicate that to you. That'll be the 14 meal plan. And then we'll open up in early August. That change period, we'll communicate out to students when that is open, and that'll run through the first week of classes there. And then we'll do that over again in December and early January for the spring semester. And then for me, the last thing I wanted to plug is share that we're going to continue to offer nutrition services to students on meal plans. We'll have again, a licensed dietitian who can help students navigate specific diets or manage allergies while utilizing the dining program. Right now, we're in a hiring phase for that position, but we expect to have someone in place this coming March, so very soon. In the meantime, many of those services that we provide are being handled by our culinary team, like Chef Jason or Giovanni, who our students have gotten to know throughout the whole fall and so far this spring. So that'll be back again. And if you're a student who needs even more specialized treatment, I know the counseling center is having some options in the interim right now as well, until we get that new person in place. And that should be in the next March. So that's it for me until we get to the Q&A.
Great. Thank you, Danny. I appreciate you sharing. And that is cool. So I just have to say, when something's cool, I love the Apartment 7 meal plan piece. I just love that we're at a university that can really listen to the feedback of students and make changes as needed. That's a really cool one. So
absolutely. It's interesting, Anne, because
yeah.
like we were a little nervous when we offering like a reduced meal plan, and what that would mean is no one going to want to live in McGloin. McGloin is still hugely popular, mostly because of that location. I mean, being right on the mall right there, and that room configuration in McGloin with the suite doubles where there's 2 shared bedrooms with a living room space in between is still really popular, regardless of that meal plan option too.
Yeah, no, that's good to know. And I feel like, and I know that Taylor said there's open houses of the different residence halls here coming up, but
yeah,
I feel like each residence hall gives you just a different feeling and a different type of experience. So I think that aligns with that really well.
That's for sure.
I think now keep putting those questions in the Q&A, but we are going to round things off with our final panelist tonight. And then once we turn things over to Anne and she presents, then we will really turn it into kind of a full-blown Q&A. But before we do that, I will pass things over to Anne, who is the director of our Student Accessibility Services.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. I am kind of an integral part in both the housing piece and the dining piece. So I'll kind of go over some general information. I can't answer specifics about requests or accommodations, but I can guide you and your students to where to go. So Student Accessibility Services does the housing accommodation request for disability-related needs. Whether that is for a physical disability, a meal plan disability, or a dietary, like we have so many options that we help support students on finding that right housing placement and making sure that we are meeting their needs in that way. Kind of some dates that everybody's been talking about, especially with the lottery and everything. We don't have necessarily a due date by you need to request these accommodations, but it is strongly encouraged that students complete our interactive process and request for formal accommodations by March 19th. So that way it's in that week where everyone is planning for those dates. We work with housing, we communicate, and then we make sure that, as much as we can, get those implemented and your roommates requests in that whole process still all fit in the same pieces. Students with accommodations are still in that lottery system. So it's not like a student can come in and get an accommodation and they automatically get spot number 1 or 10 or any of that. It is based on making sure that we provide the accommodation, and then they still are in that lottery system. Also with that, if there is an accommodation that only for some reason one housing works, it is not like a guarantee for that student, but that is the selection. And it's not guaranteed that their roommates or their preferred roommates are going to be able to come with them to that specific dorm or unit. So that's the other thing that students kind of will sometimes weigh if they are really in that need for the accommodation, or if it's kind of, I can figure out some workarounds or other strategies because it's more important to be with a specific group of people. And we work with the students and we have those conversations with them during that interactive process. So it really is just making sure that if you have a student who needs a housing accommodation, that they get to our website and fill out the housing request form, or they can email sas@creighton.edu and we can help them navigate all of those pieces. Especially if they are a rising sophomore, they've had some accommodations for their first year, and maybe they know exactly what they need, or they're not sure because there are so many housing options. We kind of help work through that, and we work with housing to make sure that we're giving an informed decision or letting them kind of navigate some of those pieces. Another piece that we work with is the dietary accommodation request. So it's not necessarily something specific to the housing selection process, but we work with Danny very closely on those meal plan options. And then if there's an additional request or reduction or any kind of exemption, we work with that medical documentation, nutritionist, and Danny to make sure that we're getting a plan that works for the student and within the meal plan options and what variety we have on campus. So really that all dietary piece also can go through the housing request and or through the dietary request, or even if a student just wants to email sas@creighton.edu. The dietary accommodation request is not as pressing, as Danny said, like it'll get assigned. It is pressing though if a student is going to need an in-unit kitchen as an accommodation though. So kind of keep that in mind when you're talking with your student on if they need an in-unit kitchen, excuse me, based on their disability needs that they need to get in before March 19th to make sure that we can get that accommodated in a timely fashion. So if there are specific questions about accommodations, please feel free to reach out at sas.creighton.edu. I usually field those on a one-to-one basis, but if there's general questions, feel free during the question and answer. But thanks for coming.
Thank you, Anne. We appreciate all of that information. What we're going to do now is we're going to switch gears. And so we're going to actually stop the share of the PowerPoint, which is going to kick us out, hopefully, to like a Brady Bunch view for folks. And I'm going to kind of try to organize this out of this Q&A. I know that a lot of our partners have been ferociously typing behind the scenes, answering all these great questions. So I'm going to start with a first question will be kicked out to Adam. So I'm going to wait and make sure I can see Adam. There he is. Okay. Adam, to clarify, the students can choose their room at the first time slot one of the 4 of them get. It doesn't have to be the leader's time. The slide said the leader's time is what matters. So can you clarify with that piece?
Yeah, I can see that's a little confusing. So they'll all get a time, and what we would recommend is once they have their times, change their group so that that person is the leader. So if Danny and Ann and I are at a group and we all get our times, I'm the leader, but it turns out that Ann has like the first slot of the lottery, we would reconfigure our group so that Ann's the leader now. But Ann will have to be the one who goes in and selects the time, selects the room when it opens.
No, that's perfect. And Adam, I have a second question for you. And I don't know if we'll have a percent or not, but what percent of rising sophomores don't have a group that they start with? I know earlier you mentioned the wizard replaced them, which I just love that. But talk to us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. We probably don't have great data on that to say specifically, but I'd say there's probably at least 15% of students who go into this process really not knowing what they're going to do. But the best advice I would give is to take advantage of the opportunities that Res Life is creating to help those students find each other. Our Wizard Online is very helpful, but I don't know that I would say anything ever replaces actually being in the same place and talking to folks. But also be persistent and don't give up. A lot of students may feel today that they know their group for next year, and come March 17th, they may not be so confident in that group anymore. These relationships can shift at the speed of light, and keep putting themselves out there and talking with folks and be present in conversations in class and around the halls. Just say, looking for folks to live with next year. But the roommate matches help our process flow more smoothly, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be success for every one of those groups. I think a student who is randomly paired with a student, either through the portal, through the wizard, or at the end of the process when we get everybody moved into a room, I think they have just as likely a chance of success in a roommate relationship if they're going to work at it. There's no magic pixie dust for a great roommate relationship. It's just work and communication, and every student is capable of doing that. I think I don't want to leave folks with a stigma that like, oh, I got paired with a random, there goes my sophomore year. Often those folks who have no, previous connection can be very great functional roommates who do very well together.
Yeah. Oh, that's helpful to hear. And Danny, I saw you unmute. Did you have something to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to add quick too that I've heard stories anecdotally from students that sometimes being a little vulnerable with not having that figured out leads to better conversations. So the one that sticks out to my head is the student whose RA just checked in with them like, hey, do you know what your plan is next year for roommates or whatever? And they're like, actually, no. And they're like, I'm glad you asked because I've talked to a couple people and they don't know. And then they can kind of start making those connections. So it's not anything to like just keep to yourself. Like there's probably a lot of other people who are still trying to figure it out. And so talking about it with your RA or, when it's getting close to that deadline and you're getting nervous, like, have you heard from anybody? Putting that out there with your friends groups can lead to good stuff too.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful piece of advice. And I know, and kind of this next question is coming for you, Taylor, and Taylor's cat. She has her cat on with us tonight, which I love. But can you speak to us a little bit more about opportunities to get connected with other students, including leadership opportunities? So maybe speaking a little bit about Cortina, because I saw some questions in the chat. But then also just what could you tell a student who doesn't have their roommates figured out just yet? What advice would you give them?
Absolutely. So first of all, Cortina is a living learning community. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with FLP, but it's very similar to that, where a group of about 30 students live in Hyder, and they do service opportunities such as like just volunteering around Omaha. And they also have some formations on Sunday nights where they'll meet with each other and discuss different topics. So it is a living learning community. If you're interested in that, you can definitely email me and I can shoot you to the correct person. Or if your student's interested in that, I believe our applications are still open for Cortina. So we would love to have that. We would love to have you in that process. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. In terms of not knowing who your roommate is going to be next semester or trying to find a roommate group, again, we have our roommate mixer on March 11th. That is a great resource for your student. And I also want to just echo what Danny said. It's normal. The changes in from first year to second year of college is astronomical often. And sometimes it's not the best idea to room with your best friend. You know, sometimes it might be, but often it's not. And so I would love to encourage your students and you to talk to their resident advisors because they know your student pretty well and they would love nothing more than to help them find a good match um, for them. And also, I'd love to put a shameless plug in for the the housing, like the way that housing does their matches is basically just through compatibility. And so if you don't have a roommate group, that's okay. Housing will put you with one and most likely it'll be fine. Like you'll be good. And we're here to support you if it goes well and if it doesn't go well. So yeah,
Thank
I
you.
think I answered all your questions. Did you say something else?
No, that was perfect because I know I asked you like 3 questions in one. That was great. I always just have to brag a little bit about the RAs and the RDs because I know that they have been trained in like conflict resolution and also doing roommate agreements. And so absolutely, if your student comes to you and shares something that of a conflict or something that's not working or not sitting just right, absolutely encourage them to take it to their RA because that's what they're there for, to help work through those pieces. And I just think anytime you're rooming or living with somebody, you're gonna bump into hurdles. You're gonna bump into opportunities to manage conflict. So 100% Taylor, I appreciate all of your answers to that. This next question, I know we still have more coming in the Q&A. Let's see. And it looks like people are on all those. I was going to send a question to Anne. And this was a question that was submitted a little bit earlier, but could you shed a little bit of light on what happens when a student fills out an accommodation request for housing? Like what happens next?
Yeah, so when students fill out an accommodation request for housing, generally someone from SAS will reach out. So Student Accessibility Services will reach out and send them a link to basically schedule for an interactive meeting with one of our staff members. If for some reason they don't get it and they're, just waiting, they can email that SAS at Creighton. But once they schedule that interactive meeting, then we meet with the student and we talk about what their needs are, what their documentation says, and then we talk about what housing options we have on campus. So it's a really interactive process and it's a kind of a multiple way kind of conversation between the student. We use their medical provider or their outside provider information. And then we also chat with like housing and dining and the student. And so it's just this really interactive process. But the most important thing is that they get scheduled to meet with one of us to kind of talk about that. And then after they meet with us and we approve the accommodation, then we send an accommodation notification to housing, and then they have that in their system and they work to make sure that placement is implemented within that setting. So it's a kind of a multi-step process.
Great. Thank you, Anne. I see in our Q&A a couple that Adam wants to kick off. So Adam, I'm just gonna give the floor over to you.
Yeah, I'm going to answer one and then I'm going to invite my assistant director for occupancy to chime in on the next one. But study abroad students, we have a very great partnership with the Global Engagement Office. They share information with us about prospective study abroad students constantly. So if a student is going abroad in the spring, they'll need to go through the recontracting process, the same as everyone else who plans to be here next year. They'll want to get their fall housing locked down through that process. And then we'll release them to go abroad in the spring. If they are planning on going abroad in the fall, they will not go through the process at this time. And we will reach out to them in October to talk with return to campus options when they return in the spring. So it's pretty straightforward. And the study abroad experience is an invaluable part of the college experience. And we're happy to support that however we can and try to help students make that a seamless experience. And then I flagged what happens if you're a group of 3 when your selection time comes and there aren't any 3-person options. I think there's tons of variations on that question. Basically, we have a group of this size, and now it's our turn, and there's no apartments at that size. So I want to introduce Abby. She's our wonderful assistant director, and her assignments team and the students at our front desk are the ones who literally field the calls when the students call us with that very issue. So I'm sure she has an answer memorized to coach students through that. So Abby, why don't you share with us what you would tell a student in that situation?
Good evening, everyone. So what we would usually say is there are the fewest amount of rooms for groups of 3. So go ahead and form your roommate group and receive your lottery times. And if none of your group members have great lottery times, then we recommend bringing someone else in to create a group of 4, or trying to split and create a group of 2, and the second person try to link up with someone else. We will have more groups of rooms for groups of 3 available this year, because we will be tripling some spaces in Kennefic Hall that we didn't this past year, just because of large class sizes, so that it's more likely that students in groups of 3 will be able to get a space. However, we still would say it's better to form a group of 2 or a group of 4 if you can bring a 4th person in. So I hope that answers your question.
Great. Thank you, Abby. We appreciate you hopping on for that one. I think I'm looking in our Q&A, and okay, no more open questions. Well, what I'd like to do, we have about 8 minutes left. This is a question for both Danny and Adam as Creighton alum. Do we have any other Creighton alum on here? Taylor, Ann? Creighton? No? Okay. As Creighton alum, can you give any advice as far as how to coach our students through if they're feeling stressed with this process? And also, I do 2 questions. Where can folks reach out to if they have questions specifically? And we'll start with Adam.
Yeah. I would say if they have any questions, our office is on the 1st floor of Swanson, our suite spec 136. They're welcome to stop by and chat with us. We also have a really valuable resource with us here in the office, in that we have wonderful students who work here who've also gone through the process as students. And I always really love to hear their perspective and how they answer some of those questions. But you can always email us at living@creighton.edu or give us a phone call. We're happy to answer any questions that we have. Where our office is open from 8 to 4:30 Monday through Friday, and just stop on in and have a chat. During this period, I mean, our foot traffic into the office is like 600% higher than it is the rest of the year. So they're in good company. I think it can feel, we want students to be informed. We want them to be involved in this. We really want to help put them in the driver's seat to this process. And I think sometimes that comes with some pressure. It feels like if I don't get this right, my whole sophomore year is ruined. But I think we really need to help students avoid that sort of catastrophizing. Finding a roommate, sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's difficult. Living with a roommate is always difficult. I love my wife more than anyone in the world, and sometimes sometimes we have fights like roommates. Sometimes I'm not the best roommate, and those things ebb and flow. This isn't a situation where things have to be perfect. We need to let go of that perfect plan we have in our head, where even the idea, I think students come in often with this idea that roommate is synonymous with best friend, and that's just not the case. And generally, I think both in my lived experience and in research I see, functional roommate groups are more likely to get along than best friends. That's a really loaded and emotional term. Find someone who is respectful and communicates well, and who has a similar sort of understanding of what a good roommate relationship is. I think that's a better building block than someone who has the same interests or someone who you think you can hang out with all the time. But ultimately, I think you have a lot of resources at your disposal. If it feels like anxiety and stress are at a level that are impairing your ability to really, function, or are causing you to, feel sick or really struggle to that level, I think our counseling center for students can be really helpful in managing that anxiety. We've got lots of professional staff in the residence halls with both from the student success coaches that are in the residence halls, resident directors and resident advisors. There are tons of folks to just hear a student out and say, okay, yeah, that sounds stressful. This is not going the way you thought it would. Now let's, in the Ignatian tradition, identify what's the next best step. And let's just take it from there.
That's great. Adam, thank you for mentioning too those success hubs in our first year residence halls, all the professional staff that are surrounding our students. And what can be tough is we know that at times students confide in their parents, their families. And so we also welcome outreach from parents and families. We always say that we want families to trust their gut. And if you have something you want to talk through, by all means, call our success desk at 402-280-1212. You can ask for me. I'd be happy to talk things through, as well as I know that folks on this call have offered an opportunity to reach out. We have about 3 minutes, maybe kind of 2. I want to kick it over to Danny as well, give him an opportunity to answer.
Well, Adam gave a great response, so I think I might just highlight because he covered so much of what I would say. And yeah, I think that like use your resources if you're feeling stressed about things. There's a lot of ways to work in housing, in just as a field or dining or accommodations or whatever. But we're choosing to work with this population of college students for a reason. We like them. We want to walk along with them, and we want to be helpful. So we're just going to be really open to a lot of that. The other thing I'd say is students that get really set on a this or bust kind of mentality when it comes to housing, often that will lead to some disappointment because a lot of people's top choices are similar. And so it's not always going to go your way. I think it's really a good idea to think through a plan B and even a plan C so that you're able to nimbly move into that when the time comes through the process. And we're going to be really communicative about all of it. So check your emails and participate in everything, meet your deadlines, do all the parts that you can do, but then also know you got these people in the background that are here to help you.
Great, thank you. And it looks like some folks are typing in the Q&A, but I just kind of want to close things up. If you run into more questions, I always tell parents and families, get a notebook, write out your long list of questions and give us a call because we're happy to talk through anything and everything that comes up. As kind of a reminder, you can always email family@creighton.edu. You can call our success desk by calling 402-280-1212. I also heard other resources on this call, living@creighton.edu. And then is it also, I don't want to get it wrong, is it housing@creighton.edu?
Living at Creighton.
Living, thank you, not housing, living@creighton.edu. I really quick want to thank our panelists for being here and giving us an hour of their time tonight, and also thank our chat helpers behind the scenes. I know that we answered a lot of questions. If we didn't get to your question, our team will be following up within the week. Also a reminder, this entire thing is being recorded and we will have it posted up in the Bluejay family portal within a week or so. Again, we appreciate all of your questions. We're excited for your students to get registered for new housing. If you run into any questions, anything doesn't sit right, just remember we trust our parents and families at Creighton, and so please reach out to us. We want to have a conversation. And with that, I think we'll close things out. We'll just say thank you again and go Blue Jays.